This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, I heard that twice. That was interesting. Okay, and then I'll share my slides, and we can kick off the call properly.
News flash hits like a hammer. Domain names got the glamour. Consulted in the mix, bringing DNS tricks, top-notch info fix.
This call is sponsored by DNS OARC, the Domain Name System Operations Analysis and Research Center.
Oh, no, don't do that again. Right, sorry, yeah, there you are. Welcome, everyone, as I just said. Good to have you on the call. As you can see, I've been experimenting with AI since I can't play any instruments, but there you are. Amazing what you can do with AI these days. Right, so agenda for our call today. I'm just going to sort of reflect on the OARC meeting, and since some of you on this call were also present, you're welcome to jump in with your comments as well. So I'm going to share my, I've deliberately picked out a handful of highlights from the call. So highly subjective, other people will clearly have different highlights, I'm sure. So as I say, do jump in if there's anything significant you think I've overlooked. And then depending on time, we'll touch on some of the recent news headlines, etc. So that's the plan for the call. Yeah, if it's interactive, I think that will be a definite feature this week. Otherwise, you may hear me talking at you for almost the entirety of the call, and no one wants that, particularly me, if I'm honest. Anyway, right, so let's just jump straight in. So as I say, I'm going to make this quite sort of selective and subjective. Call out, I think it's about a handful of sessions from last Thursday and Friday. Sort of tell you why I thought those were worth highlighting, but as I say, anyone else that was present either in person or remotely, feel free to highlight anything else that you think I should obviously have said, but for whatever reason have overlooked. First comment before I get into that, I thought it was very good quality over the 2 days. Particularly as it followed on so soon from the last OARC, which wasn't intentional. So the programme committee, I think, did a fine job in very limited time. Now, the things I've sort of decided to focus on, so I've been trying to be reasonably selective. Just two things from the Thursday. So Kathy Almond from ISC gave a presentation on Serve Stale and basically looked at some of the existing software that's deployed to just really determine whether it's useful to at any point to serve stale data from the cache, and if so, when. And you know, is there a smart way of doing it? And I thought it was a really interesting talk. It sort of highlighted that there are quite inconsistent approaches to this in various software that she looked at currently, and probably highlighted an area where a more standardized approach might be quite useful, to say, you know, when it might be appropriate to serve stale content, you know, absent an actual sort of if current answer to a DNS query. Yeah, and as she's chair of the programme committee, she's quite sensibly highlighted this is a possible talk for the next or a future OARC meeting. So it's not a topic which I wasn't aware of that come up, certainly any conference I've been in recently. So I thought it was an interesting area that probably did warrant further exploration. So purely from an interest point of view, I thought that was worth highlighting as a new thing that I hadn't sort of come across recently, certainly. Also, and I don't think I did a slide on this, no I didn't, the other one I wanted to highlight, sorry, bouncing around on the slides, was what's intended to be the start of a conversation with the community that Phil Regno sort of chaired, the president of OARC, which is whether OARC could serve a useful function in sort of looking to best practices within the ecosystem, if you will. And I think his intention is not that OARC should itself become the author of best practices. At least that's not his immediate intention. I mean, who knows, it could change in the future, but it's more a case of identifying where best practices might exist and almost act as a curator for them rather than an author of them, because you might find them in lots of different diverse locations. So pulling them into one place, and in some areas there might be a choice of different sort of best practices. So perhaps indicating where people might wish to start could be quite helpful. So it felt to me from the sort of panel discussion that seemed to be a consensus that might be a useful area to investigate. So I think there's an appetite to do more on that. Whether it needs anywhere useful, obviously it's too early to say. But I think it could well do so, just to pull together into one place from the various locations where you might find best practices, such as the IETF, such as RIPE, and a few others came up, I think, in the discussion. I'm sure all of you on this call might have your own thoughts on that as well. So just acting, as I say, as a curator of where to find the right things would be potentially quite useful. Oh yeah, actually ICANN was another place that was mentioned, for example. So those were the only two things I was going to highlight from the Thursday. There's plenty of other good stuff there, including, I might say, rather immodestly, very good, interesting discussion on ECH, but I was trying to be selective. But I just pause in case anyone who attended, as I say, in person or virtually, wanted to jump in and point to anything else that you think would be worthy of anyone who wasn't there, perhaps watching the replay when it becomes available, or taking a look at the slides which are already available. So if you think there's anything else that you particularly want to highlight, that you've got strong feelings about, just unmute or pop something in the chat, whichever's easier, and I'll just pause for a second in case there is. Eric, you got your virtual hand up. Please jump in.
Yeah, so there are two things that I thought were interesting. Well, I mean, there are a whole bunch of things that were interesting, but I was really intensely looking at Jeff Huston's talk about the resolver behavior, and it highlighted the fact that there are things that were intended to work when you have one name server looking at serving one domain or one auth names, one or two like same type name servers, and everything is different than what was originally expected because of how DNS names are shared between IP addresses of name servers, and there are right ways to serve things if you want performance. And if you don't do it the right way, your performance can be unexpected. And that's what he highlighted in that talk. And that was definitely eye-opening for anyone who's doing authoritative serving infrastructure. And being there, you could actually like follow up and say, oh yeah, that could be the reason why that's not why it's not working as expected. The other part I thought was interesting. I forgot who did it, but there was a call to encrypt between the recursive and authoritative because of not just because you want privacy, but because there are so many systems out there that are perhaps modifying those resources, and that DNSSEC may not be enough. That actually making it standardized so that we actually encrypt to the authoritative is something that is being called upon to help make the internet work the way the people serving stuff on the internet intended to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
I forgot
John
whose talk that
Todd's.
was.
Yes.
John Todd,
Yeah. Lightning talk. I think.
Yep.
Think it was. Yeah.
Yep. And a good one.
Yes.
I agree. It's an excellent point of discussion.
A couple of comments on that. Both excellent points, but clearly, I think on that latter one first, the sort of the encryption there in the sort of the in the infrastructure. I know Deprive. Well, I believe it's Deprive that has explored that over an extended period, and from my recollection, not got as far as you might expect. Which isn't to say it's not worth revisiting. And I think I'm right in saying that the feedback they got, there was a lack of interest from the authoritative sort of, operators, if you like, on changing anything. But I think that's probably most recently was being looked at about 2 years ago, because Deprive's been pretty quiet in the intervening period. So maybe John's presentation might lead to at least a revisiting of that. Yeah, as Vicky's put in the chat, a dot. The other comment, thanks for the reminder about Jeff's presentation, which was really good as always and very data rich, even though it was put together at short notice to hit the submission deadline. Definitely worth watching the replay on that. And I think if nothing else, it highlighted that just because there might be a server close to you doesn't mean to say that's where your answers will come from, as his sort of benchmarking was able to show, where I can't remember, there was certainly suboptimal response times sometimes from the testing he did. So again, that will hopefully highlight some sort of checks by people on how this software behaves, because it might not behave as you would expect, and certainly didn't seem to be optimizing for performance purposes based on the benchmarking that Jeff did. And inevitably, because he did it, I think I can't remember his sample size, but I know it was enormous. It was more than a few 100 million tests he did. I think I can't remember now. Thursday morning seems like a long time ago, but and he's done a post on that I think since as well. So there's plenty of material on that. So well worth watching the replay. Well, anyway, thanks for those, Eric. Anyone else want to jump in with anything else before I move to Friday?
I have a comment about the serve stale. That was a feature that I advocated for in Bind. It was really a knee-jerk response to the Dyn outage. And I really think after the Dyn outage, I won't say the problem disappeared, but everybody started getting secondary services because nobody wanted, to have a sustained outage like that anymore. And by the time we integrated the feature into Bind, it probably was solving a problem that didn't really exist anymore. And furthermore, I got it donated by a Bind user, and it was the implementation had been done on a much earlier version of Bind, and we just kind of grafted it in there. And I think it's uncontroversial to say that our released implementation was pretty bad. And Kathy personally spent years trying to support that and advocating for various fixes and changes. It's interesting to see now that she thinks it may have served some purpose, because it's one of the biggest regrets I have about, I put some terrible features into Bind, and this was definitely one of them in retrospect. But anyhow, the reason it's interesting to me is just thinking about how the problems in the DNS have really changed over time. And the software we have now, some of it solves problems that in some complicated ways that aren't really big problems anymore. And And yet we have new different problems, some of which it's not well suited for. Anyhow, thank you for tolerating my meta comment there.
No, that's really interesting, Vicky. Yeah, in that case, definitely take a look at the presentation, particularly when the recordings are available. Be interested to get your take on whether you think, that maybe with Kathy's sort of presentation, there is a reason to pursue it further, or whether you still think it's a solution for which the problem's no longer applicable, to sort of paraphrase what I think you're getting at. Be good to get your take.
Right. Well, that was my thinking beforehand. I mean, I saw the presentations before they were submitted. I don't have any disagreement with anything that was presented. It's just, reflecting back on how we got here. And there are probably other features. In fact, there's a few I also regret. Yeah.
I mean, having had a similar feature set, in our product, obviously based on bind, some customers have definitely appreciated having it at times, and obviously it depends on the customer and exactly where they're implementing it in their infrastructure. But I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. I think you're being a little too harsh on yourself. I don't think it's terrible that feature exists. I think it has value.
And especially with the implementation of extended errors and so on, so you can signal to the client that it's a stale answer as well. So there are.
Yes, very true. Yeah, I think that makes it even more useful.
Okay, all right, well, let's move on to Friday. I picked out a few more things on the Friday as it turned out. So as you can see, just I think 5 things on the Friday, and I'm not going to go into these in any detail, but just to signpost. I thought these were interesting ones that worthy of your time, and then as before, others jump in if you felt either overstated something or missed something. But in the chronological order, DGA domain detection. So, and since I've got a lousy memory, domain generation algorithms. So this is basically typically malicious software that's auto-generating new domain names for bad intentions. And there was an interesting presentation on a way of detecting that the domains had been sort of generated maliciously, and to actually then reliably find them with a view, obviously you can then block them or whatever, but you're aware that there's an issue. So the presentation, I think, well worth taking a look at. The software seemed to be effective. I don't think they touched on the level of false positives generated. I don't recall that being in the presentation, so that's maybe something to clarify. But notwithstanding that, as you can see from this, I sort of cherry-picked one slide from it, that they believe it's serving a useful purpose in finding previously undetected command and control servers, etc. So from that point of view, seemed to be a successful project. And since these domain generation algorithms are a real problem, I thought it was really good to see that someone's dug into that, and with I think large language models managed to find a way of automated its detection. So as I say, worth a look if that's in your area of interest. Also on sort of DNS abuse more broadly, Raphael gave again a follow-up presentation. So I'm sort of cherry-picked again one slide. He from the previous meeting, he sort of talked about transient domains, and these are domains which are registered and abused, but they typically have a lifetime which is less than 24 hours, and often their usefulness has ceased before they appear at all on anyone's radar, because they've just not been live long enough to be picked up by sort of normal software. And from the work he'd done, I think he was showing that some of these domains, they're registered and have been abused within an hour of them being registered, and so they're as I say, they're discarded before anyone's aware of their existence. They've already sort of died effectively. So normal tools are not helpful, as it says on that bottom bullet point. Roughly half of them have died within the first 6 hours of being registered. So if you're relying on them appearing in the sort of registry before you act on anything, then sort of with threat feeds, etc., then they've served their purpose before they've come into your system. So he's been sort of digging into that, and he's done some further work. I think both his previous presentation at the last OARC meeting and the update of this one, it's a really interesting area, and I've had a chat with him, and he's probably going to give a follow-up presentation on this call. But as you can tell, it's something which I thought really resonated with me as a sort of really rich vein of sort of potential research, which, as he's an academic, is not really surprising. So. And in a moment, I'll stop talking and someone can jump in who perhaps on that side, of the industry might give a different perspective. But that seemed like a really good area for me. And then just other things. It was really good to see sort of recognition of Joe Crow, who I think many of you will be aware, colleague from Comcast, who very sadly sort of passed away a few weeks ago. He'd been active in the OARC community based in Philadelphia, and had helped to host one of the more recent OARC meetings in that city. So it was good just to have that sort of moment of recognition of him at the OARC meeting. Sadly, I don't think any Comcast colleagues were present. I don't think in the meeting. I may have missed that, but nevertheless, it was good to actually sort of have that recognition there. So I thought that was a nice tribute.
Hey, Andrew, am I all right to ask a question?
Of course you are, Chris.
To clarify things, just about the domain abuse, the transient domains.
Yeah. Sorry, let me. Keep talking. I will.
Yeah.
My map is behaving, so I'll go back to the right one in a second.
So a lot of registries like Nominate, we've got a system in place that basically we've got. I can't remember what it's called now, but we get information from people like NCSC and different places to scan the domains that have been registered.
Yes.
And I think it might be an immediate sort of, it's going to reject the registration, or maybe, I don't know because I'm not the expert, I work in DNS at the moment. It might take a while before the NCSC report that or get some things from different vendors. So that might be why these domains, or partially, maybe not all of them, but partially why they are taken off the internet so quickly.
Yes, okay. I suppose I was inferring that it was a choice of their creators, but you're right. Maybe there are other reasons. Maybe it's a combination.
Yeah.
But the implication from the work Raphael has done was it was by design. But as I say, I'm going to ask him to come on the call to give a presentation, so that might be a good conversation to have.
Cool. Yeah.
To explore that further. Because it seemed as if some of these things, they were being exploited and then sort of discarded before they were on any of the radars of any of the sort of threat feed vendors, etc. But I'll maybe pause on that until let Raphael come on and then perhaps have a more sort of in-depth discussion about that. But yeah, that's a fair alternative reason, of course. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Eric, did you want to jump in as well?
Sure. Just pointing out, 13 years ago, Paul Vixie on stage saying most new domain names are crap. And
Yeah, it's
that
true.
was passive DNS is still useful for finding these as they are used, not as they're registered, but as they're used. So when they're weaponized, it is possible to find them. And the more DNS is monitored, the more we will be able to find this. But policy does need to be changed, in my opinion. I totally agree with Raphael. I'd like to go to ICANN and stump a little bit to say, yeah, let's bring it down, because the TLD operators, they're only going to do what ICANN requires them to do. So
Yeah.
if you're going to the ICANN meeting in Seattle, stomp with us.
Yes, I would love to. Unfortunately, I'm just way too busy at the moment. But
But I'm sure there'll be. Well, I don't know, Chris, whether you're planning to go to Seattle or not, but I'm confident that a number of your colleagues certainly will be there, because I know Warminet's usually fairly well represented at ICANN meetings, isn't it? So
yes, yeah, there'll be a number of people, I think.
and I suppose for those people, at least one of whom's on this call, that implement zero trust type policies on their DNS, this is a good reason why that's a helpful approach, because clearly if these are newly registered domains and you're operating zero trust, then these won't be accessible by default anyway. So it's, dare I say it, a non-problem in that environment. And so thank you, Eric, by the way, for putting in the link for Eric's, for Joe's, so donations in memory of Joe as well. That's really helpful. So just going back to that, if anyone wishes to, as you can see, there's a way to donate in memory of Joe. Okay, just briefly moving on, then I'll pause again and see what people think I may have overlooked. The two other things I was going to highlight, I think these are both, no, this one isn't a lightning talk, the next one is. Warren Kamari gave a short presentation on free and open source software in the DNS. There's a working party sort of looking at this to try and quantify how widely used such software is within the ecosystem. So not just with resolvers, but across the whole ecosystem, including EPP and so on. So the whole piece, trying to get a good understanding of how wide free and open source software is deployed, so that it's not just the obvious areas, but across everywhere. And to back up the work, and there's obviously more slides in this, I tried to again pull out one area, and this is to inform, I think it was the European Commission's work, I think it was, that was the motivating factor for this, but he felt that there was maybe some false assumptions that were being made, and that they'd underestimated just how widely used it was. But there's a survey, so you can see the QR code there, plus the URL, which by all accounts it doesn't look overly long to respond to. So if this is an area of interest to you, I mean, the most important thing is, please do the survey with your insights. That will certainly ensure there's a better informed view taken before potential legislation is crafted in this space. So it's at least based on good knowledge rather than false assumptions. And then finally, from me, this is from one of the lightning talks. Ben Schwartz, who many of you will know from Meta, gave a presentation just to remind us, in case anyone had missed it, that RFC 9704 has now been deployed, which is about split horizon DNS, and that's now a thing. It's gone through the standardization progress, so sort of split view, as you can see, just to try and explain it on one slide. So you can have different answers depending whether you're inside, say, the enterprise or outside. But he's given us, it's only a 5-minute presentation, so it's really easy to access, but it was more just a signpost that it's now gone through the standardization process, which I must admit I hadn't clocked that it come out the other side of that. So it was useful for him to have presented that. If no one else, maybe everybody else was better up to date than I was. But since many of you are on the sort of the enterprise side, I thought you might want just a reminder of that. I think, yeah, that was everything from me. So let me just go back a few slides to the agenda for day 2 and just see. I probably should have put one at the end there, but never mind. Whether anyone, again, for day 2, anything you think I have overlooked that also warrants a particular mention. And if so, now's your chance. Either pop it in the chat or just unmute and shout out. Either's fine. Okay, not seeing any hands raised this time, so maybe we've covered that. So all in all, I thought it was a really good, very sort of densely packed 2 days. So I covered a lot of ground in a pretty short space of time. So as I said at the start, I thought well done to the programme committee in particular for pulling out so much good stuff and getting it a nicely themed agenda together for us so quickly. We're still waiting to find out when the next OARC is. I think they're going to try and publish dates for at least the next couple to allow for some more forward planning. And the intention is to space them out better than happened this time round. So we'll have to wait and see what's happening when, but hopefully we'll hear from the OARC team on that shortly. Okay, right, so let's just quickly move on to some of the recent headlines from the last week or so. Firstly, I think this came out about a week ago, but I missed it, which is DNS Filter had looked at the data from 2024 and noted quite a significant increase. I think it's by about a factor of 5 in malicious DNS requests. So yeah, as it says on the slide, it now is roughly 1 in every 174 requests, and their stats suggest that a typical user is making about 5,000 DNS requests per day. I've not dug into the data behind that, so I'm just taking that at face value, and therefore that leads to, as you can see, roughly 29 threat inquiries within that volume of requests every day, which is, as I say, yeah, I think the previous year the same data suggested it was about 5 per day, so it's gone up by a factor of 6. Sorry, not 5 in the last 12 months, which is very worrying as a statistic. So you might want to take a look at that. Just and it'd be interesting to know what other people's sort of thoughts are, whether that's consistent with other sources of data, but if it's about right, then it's quite a worrisome trend. I suppose arguably good news for those of you in the protective DNS space, maybe. So every cloud has a silver lining, etc. There's an interesting piece from Vicara on another use for the DNS to help automate certificate management processes in the enterprise space. And a number of things from APNIC this week, one of which was the performance of name servers and also the resilience of name servers. And he looked both at the sort of the top level domains and then the Tranco top 1 million domains and saw some differences between them. And also he finished his post with some recommendations for a BCP for DNS service provision, which I can't remember which model he used, but it was generated by one of the AI large language models as a bonus feature in his article, which quite timely given the discussion in OARC on Thursday. His first comment was it seemed like a reasonable start, was his take on the list as generated, but you can find the list at the bottom of his APNIC post. Other stuff, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the last quarter of the year showed growth of domain name registrations of annualized growth of 1.2%. That's courtesy of the report sponsored by VeriSign every quarter. So name registrations continuing to grow, albeit I suppose at a slowing trend, which is not surprising as a sort of fairly mature industry, but it is still going upwards. Well, maybe just excuse me, mention the bottom one on the chart, which I found interesting, about crypto miners and crypto mining. So given the interest in blockchain linked naming schemes, there was quite a long article, and I wrongly attributed this, I don't know why, in the APNIC blog it's actually Akamai. So apologies to Akamai colleagues for crediting that to APNIC, but as you'll see from the URL, it's definitely Akamai did this. A really good article. Actually, it gives a helpful overview of motivations for crypto mining, what constitutes an attractive currency, if that's the right word, for crypto miners, who are stealing your resources to mine, and a table of known sort of URLs of known mining pools, which I think all of which were malicious, so useful places to block potentially. So really a good article. I was very impressed, and I might be the target audience for this, but I thought it was a really interesting piece. So good to see. More research. This one definitely is APNIC from Jeff on name servers and various other bits and pieces, including a mistake in my view. There's an article from ZDNet saying how you can switch on encrypted DNS in Android, which if you weren't aware what buttons to press, that's quite useful. But it did suggest that Cloudflare's sort of Quad 1 was a good choice because it automatically included malware filtering, which it doesn't. You need their filtered option. It doesn't filter by default on Quad 1. It's 1112 or 1113. The family service do filtering, but Quad 1 doesn't. So it was sort of maybe a useful article, but with a bad recommendation in my view. And then finally, ICANN's APAC DNS forum, they've confirmed that's going to be in Hanoi in early May this year. So I think they've just confirmed the dates in the last few days. There was a whole load of other stuff which was sort of mildly interesting, but in the interest of time, I won't go through all that, but plenty of different things. So other topics in the news, so you may or may not find interesting, but these are the things that caught my eye for a variety of reasons. And then just to finish off, so the usual deadlines coming up. So if you want to contribute to a call for abstracts on global southing, you've got till tomorrow on that. If you've got comments on the Eurodig draft program, you've got till Wednesday on that. Then the end of the week, any nominations for the PIR Board of Directors. There's a vacancy for Quadliner as for a web developer, and perhaps more useful, a call for experts. You can also see for the Destination Earth Strategic Advisory Board. So various things coming up this week, and then more into the future as well. Actually, what's happened there? So my PC's doing something strange. I don't know if it's affecting what you can see. Hopefully not. I'm trying to make that go away.
We're all seeing your emails right now.
Oh, no.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. It was a being thing to
No, who knows? As I say, it was just a bit misbehaviour. It's all right. Right. I think that's back to what it should be. Hopefully it didn't actually affect you, but yeah, it did all things on my screen for a moment. And then various events coming up. As I said last week, there's a lot of stuff going on this month and next, as you can see, including from this week, Cisco Live in Amsterdam, and then State of the Net tomorrow in Washington, the annual State of the Net conference, which is usually good value, and you can attend remotely, I think, for free. Is paid for in person, I think, free remotely, and so on. So lots of good things, and it's not so far to the next IGF meeting. That's about 6 or 7 weeks away in Bangkok, so that's coming up quite soon as well. So loads of good stuff in the diary. And then a reminder, finally, next week we're going to talk about, or we'll say we, specifically the DNS Research Federation. Lucian Taylor's coming on to talk about Trust Checker and some related topics, I think, which will link into the work they're doing at the moment for the Global Anti-Scam Alliance. So I think that loosely fits into the DNS abuse space as a general topic. And then possibly the week after, I think I'd tentatively suggested that that might be a good date for colleagues from Domain Tools. I think that was the date I'd suggested. I don't know, I think it was Joe said he would go and sort of touch base with colleagues to see if that worked or not, but we don't need to talk about that now, but it'd be good to know if that works or if we need to find an alternate date for that.
I did mention it to him, just waiting to hear how schedules are looking.
Yeah, it was only a few days ago, to be fair, Joe, so brilliant. Thank you for passing that on anyway. Okay, so that's probably sufficient from me. Let me stop talking there and stop sharing my screen. If the buttons are vaguely working, which they seem to be. Hope that was useful, but is there anything that anyone else wants to touch on or anything you want to revisit that I sort of briefly ran through at pace over the last 45 minutes or thereabouts? Is there anything, or anything else to say you want to mention that's on your radar at the moment? That's fine too. And if so, just unmute and say so is probably the easiest thing. I'm not seeing anyone typing. I don't see anyone unmuting. So I'm assuming probably not. Okay, well, in which case, I hope that was useful. As I say, I thought the meeting, the OARC was really good last Thursday, Friday. It was good to see a few people in the flesh rather than virtually for a change. And definitely, if you weren't there, there's plenty of good stuff to just take a look at as the recordings become available. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks or so. But anyway, notwithstanding that, have a fantastic week as always, and look forward to catching up same time next week. With as I mentioned, Lucian Taylor from the DNS Research Federation will be sort of talking about some of the stuff they've done recently in the DNS abuse space. So have a great week and catch up next Monday. See you all then. Bye everyone.